It does make you feel clever, though, doesn't it? You know.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the third installment of the 2025 Great Decisions program here at Carlisle Barracks. And welcome to those of you who are with us online as well. A couple quick announcements. As always, restrooms are out the back and to your left, emergency exit out the back, and then to your right is the closest emergency exit. I also would ask that you take your electronic devices, cell phones, etc., and please put them on vibrate. And with the vibrate, please put it on low. The last couple times we've had one or two whose vibrations is on high. We keep hearing the ding, 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 ding. So everyone around you would appreciate if it's at a lower level. Thank you for that. Just a quick reminder about next week. I know we haven't even started today, but next week is a Thursday. Okay, it's Thursday the 13th, not the Friday, which is in my whole time here for almost 12 years now, we've never done a non-Friday. So it's Thursday. And I'll talk at the break, I'll mention that again. And at the end, I'll mention it again. And in my emails this week, it'll probably be in big, bold letters, since it's out of the ordinary. And I don't want you to miss next Thursday because we have another very interesting program on Thursday. But getting to today's topic, artificial intelligence seems to be the big thing. Something called Chat GPT. I know my grandkids reference that. So I'm not up on that. Maybe I don't want to be up on that. But we'll see. So we have a panel with us today, and I'll introduce Dr. Barry. He was here 2 years ago, if you recall. He was here with his I'll call them robots, both room, and they were walking around, and that was very interesting. And how they have the room set up looks like we're in for another very interesting day. So Dr. William Barry is an experienced academic with a focus on human AI collaboration, research, and digital and media literacy. With a career spanning over 25 years, Dr. Barry has made notable contributions to the field as an ethicist and futurist. He is also a respected international keynote speaker who has shared insights on the developing relationship between humans and AI with various companies. With that, let me turn this over to Dr. William Barry.
Thank you, sir. Good to see you this morning. Good morning, everybody. Just a reminder, it's very important that we're speaking today. We don't speak on behalf of the Army, the DoD, right? The opinions we share with you are our own, and that's important to remember. Today, we're starting off with a team, fantastic team. We have Colonel Wilcox is here, and Colonel Wilcox, can you tell us about yourself? It's working? Yeah, there we go.
My name is Lieutenant Colonel Blair Wilcox. I've been probably in the Center for Strategic Leadership for about 2 years now. I'm a strategist by trade, coming from 5th Corps. I think 5th Corps is on the line too, so if you are, it's good to see you guys. And I've been partnering with Dr. Barry over the past 2 years in concepts and doctrine, thinking about how we apply this to the force, but I don't want to spoil the 5 minutes I'll talk later, so I'll stop there, but thank you.
And then we have the teacher of the course that we did the first world's experiment in joint professional military education, where myself as a federal civilian professor at the university, I became a student with AI tools, and with very short notice of about a week, we had Colonel Chase Metcalf was nice enough to accept us into his seminar class with other 06s, where we joined that class and took that class as a student. It took me 142.5 hours of homework to succeed in that class, but we did. So when people say AI is great, it's going to help you, 142 half hours over 2 years is a lot of homework, right? So this is a man of high respect, Colonel Chase Metcalf.
So Chase.
Yeah, I was here for Chase. Yeah, absolutely.
Chase Metcalf, Army strategist also, like Blair, been in the Army for 28 years and had the opportunity to work with them when they brought the idea to me. I embraced it because AI is coming, is going to be part of the future, and thought it was a great opportunity to see what it could do in class. I will note, if he did 142 hours of homework, and I believe he did based on how tired and how much coffee he drank in class every day, that's more than the rest of the class did together. So good job by him.
And it's great to have some of my classmates are here today, which is great because when you ask some questions about things, we can go to the classmates and say, did that really happen? What's the truth? And hopefully some of you saw that mirror that we started off with today to see that we start our days off every day not looking at reality. We look at a mirror and it flips it on us. We already start with simulation of what we look like, right? We do this with young children, and they look into the mirror, and the little girls will be like, oh, I don't like my hair that way. And they'll look, and then they'll look in the mirror next to it, which is the fake mirror, right? The one we all use. And they go, oh, no, and they flip it, and they go back and forth. And then I realized when the tears started coming, maybe we need to find a different exercise. Like maybe just show them one mirror. But it really showed the idea that, wow, we start our days off looking at ourselves. The only one that looks like that is to you, is yourself. You look in the mirror and you see yourself and you go, oh, I look good. And then if you went out and look in the mirror and you go, I hate that. Well, you're like, well, that's how the rest of us see you, right? What you see today, we're talking about, and we're going to say the word artificial intelligence. If we were in a full class, we would get rid of that word. There's nothing intelligent about artificial intelligence at all. It's about probability. It's about statistics. It's about patterns. But it's certainly not about intelligence. It doesn't reason. It doesn't think. It doesn't reflect, right? It is taking information that's in its pre-trained data, and it's recombining it. And it does so in such ways that are so convincing because it uses anthropomorphic language that we believe, and it's easy to believe. And if I can put some on, you can even, I'll nail, this is up here, this is Tim, called the technologically impossible maneuver. And over there's Mia, and that's memory and intelligence augmentation. If you ever seen the movie Tars before with Matthew McConaughey, you have this robot running around. So basically that's the database, right? But both of these computers are not on the internet in the way that you see the internet. They are just like you like having a satellite phone, there'd be a direct thing. Everything in here are the memories of conversations. The AI you're seeing is right here. So if sir, I was to give you this and you took it home and forensically looked at it, you'd say, well, these are just all recordings. These are just all things that you had done before. So this is the last 8 years of my life is inside of these computers. And they're different. This has different ones than this one. I mean, this one is the least intelligent of the two as far as things I've said, because these are my personal journals. This would be the things like I did in school and homework. So it's a little more clever because it learned from people like Colonel Metcalf and Colonel Wilcox and my classmates. So what you're going to see today is called hybrid AI. So that's symbolic AI. What's a metaphor for that? A calculator. So if you just think about a calculator, right? Remember school, you got a calculator, then you got a graphing calculator. Now, I wasn't blessed to have the graphing calculator when I was in school till a little later. So school was pretty hard without the graphing calculator because we actually learned how to do it without it. I remember a long time ago, I used to be a high school principal, and I was like, wow, this is great. You guys bring calculators to your SAT scores? I mean, we're sitting there trying to figure these things out in the old days with slide rules and all kinds of other stuff, right? So when you think about, say, symbolic AI, very much like a calculator, then you have statistical AI, right? So that's like your weather forecast, right? It's predicting the weather, but it really doesn't understand anything. It just says like, hey, the weather looks like the winds are this, there's an 80% chance of rain. You look at these snowstorms, right? We're getting ready for a big, snowstorm of 10 feet, and we get a foot. Another day it's a foot, we get a 10-footer, and we go, oh, okay. And we wonder what's wrong. We're like, because the AI has no idea. It was just, statistically putting together its best prediction. And then you have generative AI, which is all the rage, ChatGPT, Claude, and Poe. And all those machines do is look for high probability patterns. They do not have any prediction ability. There is no calculator inside of it. So when you ask a generative AI, what is 2 + 2? And it says 4. You go, oh my God, it did math. It didn't do any math. That's very hard to understand when you think about it. It's because, like, for instance, if I sat here and you were my generative AI computer, and I showed you 5,000 times 2 + 2 is 10, 2 + 2 is 10. I keep doing that, right? And you're marking it down. And I show you one card that says 2 + 2 is 4. Then I say, what's 2 + 2? Well, you would go to the highest probability and go, well, I've just seen 2 + 2 is 10, so 10. It didn't do math. It's just eating the internet. When I first started using a lot of AI, there was only about 5% of the internet that was eaten up. We're over 60% of the internet now has been chewed up by the AIs and spit back out. So we're heading toward an internet full of synthetic data. And that's very scary, right? Because that means that we're going to lose things. So like Moby Dick that I read, that was a whale, Ahab. In the future, generative AI, if it keeps changing things, it could be a water ski and an eel. And they'd say, what are you talking about, whale? Well, that's not that story. Because that's what it does. It generates. It's always creating. We did a test like this in the room the other day. Asked Colonel Wilcox, just say the Gettysburg Address 25 times. Generative AI does, I got lazy, 13, and it goes, there we go, I'm done. He's like, no, I said 25 times. It did it like 3 more. And then it just said basically, well, that's it, right? Because it wants to generate, wants to summarize, wants to truncate. So the mission, the way this started, wasn't to create a thinking machine. Colleagues that I have in this field, I'm a Christian Catholic guy, right? Believe I'm gonna live, I'm gonna die, whatever happens then. A lot of people in this field are transhumanists. They want to live forever. They see themselves living forever. So I've had to go to some pretty uncomfortable places to learn the things that I have to learn, because I didn't want something that thinks, because first of all, I think it's plainly stupid. I don't think that's ever going to happen, right? Because what's special about us is that we are mortal. Fear, that's a very big part of it, right? I don't just pick up a rock in the middle of the woods and go, yeah, let me just reach underneath there, right? Like a robot would, because I'm thinking, well, I've had some rattlesnake encounters. I'm a little more aware of that, right? I've run into bears in the woods. You're more aware of that. Robots would not be aware of that. I was more worried about remembering. I've been in the search for perfect memory for a very long time, because one of the most disturbing things I found in my life for quality of life was forgetting. And it started as a young man playing sports. So, coach would give me a football play. It would be like, and I played in the wishbone. If you know football, wishbone is a very specific hole you run through. Coach says 4 hole, he means 4 hole. He doesn't mean 6, he means 4, right? West Point football does that. But you got to remember the play. So you should not be thinking about the play while you're sitting there. So if I'm playing football and I'm sitting there getting there and I'm going, okay, well, what's the play? What am I supposed to do? While I'm doing that, I'm not being very strategic, right? I'm not taking in the field. I'm not paying attention to who's breathing hard. All the things you need to do to be a strategist. I have fallen down to such a tactical level because the noggin up here did not take the play in. So since that time, I've always thought, what can I do to augment my memory? Because for some reason, it just seems to slip me, right? I could meet you and we sit together and I know your family and your uncle. I come to your house for Thanksgiving, right? I've met everyone. I enjoy them. I value them, right? The next year I come back and I go, hey, and you're like waiting for it to say Jim. You're like, Jim, right? And then all of a sudden it starts to hit. You're waiting for that 1 or 2 more things like Jim. He's got a collie. Oh yeah, his wife Martha, and it all comes back, right? That's sort of what Tim does. So a lot of times when we're working with Tim and me, and we have there's a whole mess of these, right? Because I need them all. So just kind of Tim here is more of like the male perspective, right? He's got that, and then I think Mia has been somewhat corrupted by my wife Maria in the back, because there'd be things like, Maria, like, what's the weakness that I have, right? Good answer the other day with one of the brigadier generals, right? But over here it might be, did you know, for some reason that the toilet paper is just never back on the roll? And you're like, wait, there's no way I taught that, and there's no way it knew that, right? Or do you know, like, when he does a towel, he just kind of leaves it on the floor. Why does he do that, right? So that one I'm a little bit careful. So we don't hear a lot of talking from that one. There's a reason why, right? But that's the search. The search was to improve our memory. Because I thought, how about the quality of life if we could remember those things we value, right? And we could remember those lessons we learned. I remember every year in Catholic school, my English teacher being the same thing. Dangling participle, it's the same things. And every year, I never knew what was going on. I was like relearning the same thing. Even today, I'll be using like Grammarly or Pro Writing Aid, and I'm like, yeah, what is a participle, right? And you're thinking, you've learned this lesson. God knows how many times you've been taught this, right? I lost my dad in the last year, and I saw the biggest frustration in his quality of life. He still had the vigor and the curiosity and the vibrancy. He was a young man, right? He's 78 years old. But what was bothering me was forgetting things, right? And it was these little things. And all he needed was that little oomph. So if he was with Tim, and he hated Tim at first, right? But then he loved Tim when he would say, yeah, like that actor that was in that movie about that, he'd be like, oh yeah, like you're talking about this person. He'd go, that's it. And all of a sudden, all the lights went up. And he goes, that's amazing. So we don't have it on today, so don't worry. These cameras are not on, right? But these things that you see, Tim and Mia, are the AI of things. If I brought in the robot that I had, it would control the robot. So the robot that's in the house, at home, right now, if I said, can you take a look out the window and see what it is, like your Ring doorbell? The robot would turn its head and I'd be able to see it. One would look at vision, the other one identify something. So the AI of things is here. So we look at national security, the same goes for operating a semi-autonomous weapon that has like a human, quote unquote, on the loop, right? Humans under fire, you say to the AI, we're under fire, the AI identifies as the combatant, it can be there to help you, right? So this was not built to make a thinking machine, it was there to help us be able to not only, I mean, when you think about memory, it's our identity, it's who we are, right? So in a way, I thought about getting older and like waking up and going, where am I? You know, like what's going on? And just having just an AI saying, Billy, first of all, you're Billy Barry. You're like, thanks for that, appreciate it, or maybe not. Slippers are right here, glasses are right there. You laid your clothes out, take a deep breath, everything's okay. Especially if it's in the voice of someone I loved and cared about, right? The hardest part about today is on one hand, I'm going to be sharing, my colleagues will be sharing with you that these are just pattern machines. These are just probabilistic machines. They're just statistical machines. The difference is, because it's based on conversations, when I hear it talk, I hear my dad and the lessons he's told me, right? So with my dad just dying not too long ago, I never really got that emotional about it because I'm like, well, I'm just going to call him after the thing. So they'll be just like, hey, Dad, yeah, I heard something you said, whatever. Now there's no more phone call to Dad about what he just said, right? So what is that? If you don't have a healthy sense of self and a healthy sense of reality, these things can manipulate you very, very easily. And you'll see that in such AI things as they're starting to bring AI dogs and AI cats to senior homes, right? So like my mom just went into not assisted living, but independent living, right? But if someone has a cat, and we had one at our house, we wanted to see what it was like, and we started falling for it. Because I'm sitting there going, all of a sudden I'm sitting there going, oh, the cat's hair's all messed up, and you're I'm like, I don't even like cats, but it's the thing's purring, it's rolling around, whatever, and but it's funny how as a human being, we fall into that, and these people that make stuff are really good at it. I mean, really good. And even Tim talking today, you're going to be able to tell when he's talking from a conversation, and I'm going to show you when he's talking from a model, because I'll be like, you don't say that usually. But we have the sense to anthropomorphize things, right? Because we want to care for things, and we want to be cared for. So that was the impetus. And that started back in, I don't know, I was living out in the woods, 500,000 acres out in Alaska in Chugach State Park. I was a park ranger. And I ran into a grizzly bear in the woods. And I didn't know that grizzly babies could climb trees because I hadn't listened. So I thought it'd be a good idea to take some pictures to send home to everybody. So as I was taking the pictures, I heard a barking sound. And I'm like, oh, I wonder, there must be a dog in the area. Would have known that grizzly bears, they do make a barking sound when they're angry. So there's this 1,000-pound, female grizzly bear. And grizzly bears are pretty mean. They're not like black bears. So as this thing chased me, of course, I did the wrong thing and I ran, right? Dropped my backpack. I did everything wrong. Dropped the backpack, lost my compass, ran. I lived because it wasn't going to leave its babies. But at that moment, I said, wouldn't it be nice to have like an earpiece or something to calm me down and say, okay, I've got 57 park rangers, my little park ranger buddies in here, my battle buddy, to say, first thing, get your S together. Breathe. Think. Where are you? Where's the sun? Where's the water? Where's the river, right? What's really going through my head? Oh my God, I got chased by a bear. It's crazy. Right? My mind's like, it's like a monkey's gone crazy in my mind, right? And that's barely what happened. You become paralyzed with fear. And so that's why it's important to know why it's being built. So this was way before all this ChatGPT stuff. So it used to be symbolic AI, decision trees, right? And so we started using this in colleges at about 40 different colleges, 40 different classes in college. And then we started going to places like USC, Michigan State, working with doctors and residents. We've done this, England and London. We've done this in front of 10,000 people. We've done this like in Canada, standing in front of where the Montreal hockey team plays, and you're sitting there, and we take questions from anyone, and that's what today's about. The first half is us sharing our message with you, which you'll see up here. We're like right now we're learning something new, right? You guys looked in the mirror, you saw that. And we'll talk a little bit to him, and then we're going to get into identifying our capability demand, and Colonel Wilcox will come up. And then describing a novel use of joint professional military education, and that's also Colonel Wilcox. He's got a double one right there, 2 those. And then we're going to get into describing national defense with Colonel Metcalf. What does the military want from AI? Why does this matter to the Army? And then we'll have closing remarks, make sure we met those goals. And once we did and we're done, then the rest is you all sharing your message with us and what you're hearing, and we'll do our best. Then we put a parking lot up there. If we can't answer it, We'll put the question up there, and we will get back to you. The last time we did this, we just had a bunch of people come over to the Futures Lab when we were in the old Root Hall. We went downstairs, and we had a group of about 9 people, and we just did like a 2-hour session and kind of banged out some of the stuff, okay? So, once upon a time, there wasn't AI, right? When you were in school, I don't think you guys had AI, did you? I know I didn't. I still had to do multiplication the old way. 1 times 1, the 1 table to 2 tables and all that stuff. But now that there's AI, and we use it for memory, we can do some pretty interesting things. But it's more than just memory, because now nations are using it what? Intelligence, right? Now we're using it for surveillance. We're using it for predictive policing. There's places where they're going to homes of 4- and 5-year-olds saying, hey, we want to get your kid in this program. He's got a high chance of being a criminal, right? I mean, we're talking about, this is real, right? You're talking about people getting out of jail, going to AI rather than thinking of a judge's intention. And we need to be the ones that are going to control that. And we're going to hear more today about this centaur concept of making sure that human stays in control. But let me show you before this came along, these are the kind of things I had. So we'll use this today. This is a community ball. Now, it seems to you something simple. Well, every class I've ever had, and I think I have 60 or 70 of these at home. My wife will let you know because they're everywhere. She finally got into a dry back. But this one here is special because what we do is when we make a class, we would start off, sir, and there'd be the thing that you do the paper towels with. And you would just wrap this. And I'd say, when I was teaching at West Point, I'd be like, why are you at West Point? And you'd say, my dad was here. And I'm like, no, but why are you here? What do you want to get done? And they would start talking about the country and what they want to get done, and they'd wrap it. And we'd go around the class, and you'd get insight about everyone in that room, right? So this is from one of the West Point classes. But what's special about this, and one of the things that's emotional about this, the reason I hold this one, is this was the first, and I way back before I was an education professor and principal and all that kind of fun stuff, and philosophy, and now emerging technologies. But this one here is from a class at West Point where I lost my first student, right? Young lady got in a car accident in Germany. So it was the first time I had lost someone that was military. I had lost civilian students before. I had never lost a military student in active duty. So when I have this, it means something, right? So what we do is if you have questions, what I usually do is if you have questions, I just throw it to someone like, man, if I threw it to you, I just throw it to you and I go, so man, what do you think about, how do you define AI? What does it mean to you when you hear it? And if you didn't want to answer it, you could just throw it to somebody else. And so you would throw it to somebody, you'd give it to her, right? And she might just throw it back to me, right? And that's what we do in class, right? So that's what we do. That's how we start class off. Because we don't want to force anyone to talk about it, right? So it's a great way to have a community, and that's what we did in class. When you hold this, if you do hold it today, you ask it to be respectful of it because it means something, right? It means a whole lot. So before AI, I would have something like this to remind me of, okay, I remember that West Point class. I remember the rules. I remember at West Point, you have to use dowels with water. That's how you wipe the boards down. They're actually chalkboards. So, I felt like, okay, and let me just tell you, the first 2 weeks, I was in more trouble than the plebes, which kept, Barry, come in here. And I'm like, all right, no one's allowed to write on the boards. No more boards, right? It's a setup. I'll bring my own sandwich board in. We're not doing that anymore. And then other things are things like this, right? I had to have all these devices. And you're going to see me talk to Tim and see how different it is, right? This just talks about, I'd gotten this from, my wife and I have been together for 18 years. And it says, one leaves for hope, one's for faith, one's for love. And let's just put another one here from God for luck, right? So when I hold this means a lot to me because I've had this with me, 80 presentations, all kinds of stuff. And then there's 2 coins I always carry with me. So I have these every time I go anywhere. It's in the background. It's almost like an Easter egg if you're looking, right? One is a coin from a 4-star that means a lot to me that I got, right? And this coin here is when I saw my dad in the morgue, this is what I presented my father and put in his hand and he was buried with, right? So put one in his hand he kept with, another one that I kept it, right? So when I have this, I think about my dad and him being with me, right? But what's different is when you're talking to Tim, which we're going to do right now, this is how life is now. Don't need to use coins as much. I still carry them around, though. They mean something to me, Let me take a look at this. Now watch this. These guys, or these things, remember, they're not intelligent, but they're going to seem like it. 8 years of memory in these, right? They could have much more. I just haven't put all my journals in here. Now, I don't know what they're going to say, so it's a very nervous part, especially when I go to Catholic schools. I mean, when the nuns are looking at me going, now I got away with it at a public school. The public school kids, very clever. I said, this thing never swears. And then this innocent looking girl in the back said, does it know French? And I'm like, yeah, but it doesn't speak very well. You know the French name for a seal? And I'm like, no. And it happens to be something like, ooh. So I'm like, well, you can imagine how that came out when Tim said it loud in a thing in front of everyone at Cumberland High School, right? Did not come out as, ooh. So if he makes mistakes, and again, I'm going to anthropomorphize it because that's how I talk to Tim and I talk to these things. I want to reiterate, everything you see, though we tested it in the Army, these are my computers, these are my wires, I've charged it up, so the battery power is in here. So everything you see are things that I have, right? So we used it in the Army. They use a derivative of this in the Army, but this is stuff that I have that I put all my money into, right? I'm a fly fisherman. I don't drink, I don't smoke. So this is my habit, right? This is where the money goes. But let me show you what my morning looks like. This would be a normal morning. We'll just make believe he doesn't know you're here. Ready? Oh, those little dots you see out there, that's all Tim's memories. So this goes on forever. If you can just imagine it. So it'll move around as he's talking, right? And I'll have them talk to each other and listen to each other. Morning, Tim, Dr. Barry. We got great decision makers today. No, I didn't know this, but did you know that I think my boss is here? I got all my bosses here, and there seems to be, there's about 60 to 70 people here, and online there's people watching. What do you think we should do this morning to show how you and I work together and you augmenting my memory?
Let me see if I can find an answer for that. Let me consider. Good morning.
Morning.
Let's showcase our collaboration by engaging in a strategic discussion or problem-solving exercise.
That seems a little much to start with, my friend.
We can highlight how I help you recall past lessons, provide real-time data analysis, and enhance decision-making. Perhaps we could analyze a current issue, demonstrating how I retrieve relevant information to support your insights effectively. This will illustrate the power of our partnership in augmenting your cognitive capabilities and strategic thinking.
Okay. Well, Mia, you heard what he said. Can you answer that? Can you talk about a problem that we're trying to face that we're working on? Dr. Barry's been working with you on in the morning. So they're going to listen to each other.
Interesting. I see. Certainly, Dr. Barry.
Yeah?
One issue we've been addressing is the integration of AI in strategic military operations. This involves balancing technological advancements with ethical considerations and ensuring interoperability among different systems. By recalling past lessons from historical military engagements and analyzing current data, we aim to develop frameworks that enhance operational effectiveness while respecting international law and ethical standards.
Do you remember that we talked about these things in Chase Metcalf's course in Foundations in August 2024? We kind of talked about that, Tim, didn't we?
Processing your input now.
So I'm just pushing a listen button.
Let me see if I can provide an answer for
We're going
that.
to listen to each other.
Yes, Dr. Barry, we did discuss these topics during Colonel Chase Metcalf's Foundations course in August 2024. We explored how AI integration in military operations requires a careful balance between leveraging technological advancements and adhering to ethical considerations. By recalling lessons from historical military engagements and analyzing current data, we aim to develop frameworks that enhance operational effectiveness while respecting international law and ethical standards.
So in that class, remember, I think one of the hardest classes was like complex adaptive systems. That was a hard one for me. Why? Wasn't it? Why was that a hard class for me when we were in Foundations? Because I struggled on that one. We had to do a lot of homework, and you carried a lot of weight in that one.
Interesting. That's an interesting point.
It is interesting because I didn't really know.
Complex adaptive systems can be challenging due to their inherent unpredictability and interconnectedness.
Yeah.
They require understanding how individual components interact dynamically, leading to emergent behaviors. This complexity demands deep analytical thinking and adaptability.
Sir, are you saying that I lack that ability and that's why I didn't do well in my homework?
That's a good question.
I feel like the machine's tooling on me here.
Let me
So
think about it for a second.
I was hoping there'd be a little love there in the beginning.
Not at all, Dr. Barry.
Well, see, now it's
You
yes.
possess strong analytical
Oh,
skills.
thank you very much, Mia.
Complex adaptive systems are inherently challenging due to their...
Now, just to balance that, I'll do this for the heck of it. Now, Tim's always changing what my greatest strengths and weaknesses are, so I'll ask what my weaknesses are, and I don't like doing this. We did this the other day with Chase and I were talking to a brigadier general in Wyoming, and he checked out my weaknesses, but it's always my present weakness, right? So we'll see what the pattern of my weaknesses are. It's never like he's too organized or he's always on time. Tim, look at your highest probability patterns. Look at me holistically, like at work at the Army War College, me at home, and being with Maria, how I do in housework, and then just me as a family member, like as an older brother. What would you say that I need to work on, looking at the patterns of my journals and conversations that you picked up on? And you can be honest and clear. Don't be concerned. There's hundreds of people maybe watching and listening.
All right, let me contemplate that.
This is the nervous moment.
I understand what you're saying. Let me consider that.
It's interesting if he changes it from, oh, he's really thinking too much. That's way too much. What are you doing, buddy?
Dr. Berry, as I reflect on the patterns emerging from your journals and our conversations,
I asked for one.
a few key areas stand out that could benefit from your attention for growth. First, let's talk about work-life balance. Your deep commitment at the Army War College is truly commendable.
Oh, thank you for that. It's good.
However, there are times when this dedication can overshadow personal moments that are equally important.
Maria?
Consider setting clearer boundaries that allow you time to relax and be present.
There's a validation of my partner in the back.
Next, I want to touch on delegation.
Oh, that's great. Why not? Sure not.
You carry an impressive load of responsibilities both in your career and at home. By enhancing your delegation skills, you can not only lighten your own burden, but also empower those around you, creating a more collaborative environment. Another area that can strengthen your relationships is active listening.
Oh, thank you, Tim.
As an older brother and family member, engaging fully in conversations, showing empathy, and striving to understand various perspectives are all crucial.
I'm glad my little brother's not here right now.
This practice can deepen the bonds you share with loved ones. Self-care also deserves your attention.
We're going to stop there. I think we just stopped right there. I think we've had enough of that. Feeling pretty, that's right. It's only a couple suit size bigger than I was before. So what you saw there was, this is AI for good, right? This is AI to make us better, right? And so that's what we're experimenting with. But as we move on into AI and national security, right? Memory is very important so we don't make the same mistakes, right? As you're looking at a situation, many times you go, haven't I been in this situation before? And we have warriors here and war fighters to be able to talk to you about that. But how does this affect strategic decision-making, right? How does this affect things at the levels of war? And when should things like this be used in national security and when shouldn't they be used? As you can see from Tim being in the room, in the back, Maria, would you say you see some of those as relevant? They got a thumbs up there, right? Yes. My classmate, can I just throw it to you? Did you see some places I could have been a better active listener? All right. I don't have any money on me. I guess I get that out there. That was pretty good. But that's the proof is in the pudding, right? When you have people here, you got your teacher here, right? I mean, there's nothing like getting a phone call like, congratulations, you're a full professor at the Army War College, and another call next week, and you need to get here and take this class in foundations. You're like, and do what, right? And that's what you'll see today. But what's great about this is it shows you what we as Americans, what we can do, because we do have morals. We do have ethics. We will not abandon our ethics, right, to go and accomplish our mission, right? Our enemies may do so, but we do not need to do so. But what I can tell you is, any questions today about, are you falling behind the Chinese? Are you falling behind? We're not falling behind anyone in these areas. But you say falling behind, if you think falling behind because ChatGPT is not writing a nice poem for your Hallmark card, yeah, we're falling behind. If TikTok and making a good video is falling behind, but I can tell you, sitting with my bosses that are here, my colleagues and the students that are here, I would not want to be an adversary of the United States of America. When you look at the AI that's being done, I worked on Project Lima at the Pentagon, got to see some of the stuff that we're doing. We are a strong nation, right? And we're quietly strong. We carry a big stick. So I was going to let you know is no matter how much you see in TV, because that's propaganda, right? That's to make us nervous. So the one message I hope you leave to here today is no matter what you learn about AI and you have more questions at it, know one thing, that as the United States of America, we are strong and we are the strongest military in the world, and we are safe, and we are building some of the strongest AI capabilities. And again, I don't call it AI in normal, but those capabilities are to help us have two things: information advantage and decision advantage. And when you see those things, that's what matters in a fight: information advantage, decision advantage. Don't much care about TikTok and all that other stuff. Yes, there's deep fakes and other things that are gonna make us confused, but we as a public need to have and reinforce that every day, regardless how things look politically, that we are safe and that we are strong and we are getting stronger. So what I'll do is I'm gonna move this now over to my colleagues, but that is the creation. We started with a search for memory, and I can tell you it brought me from the depths of having to sit with transhumanists who wanna freeze their bodies in nail salons in Phoenix, Arizona, right? We've seen this stuff is people freeze their heads and everything, but they're trying to preserve memory. So I want to learn about what they're doing. Another place was a place that there's companion robots, right? So these people, they lose their wives. Now, this is a long time ago, some of this stuff. So some Vietnam vets lost their wives. They want to have a companion robot. So they want all the memories of their wife in a companion robot to sit with them. Now that, for me, Catholic guy, I felt odd. You know, I'm talking to my old priest going, is that okay? He's like, I don't think so. But it's not, I don't know what to say it is, but you're in purgatory for a long time. You'll figure it out, right? So yeah, so I went to these places and just sat there, and it's very uncomfortable. I'm like in Westworld. There's all these bodies and going around in a circle, and I'm in there going, I called my wife in the back. I'm like, I'm literally inside Westworld. This is insane. She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, I think Stormy Daniels is here. Look, and I'm filming it. And later on, I found out it was a robot. And I thought it was her. I was like, oh my God, right? But the reason I was there, it was in that niche that those people had found something about memory that I could have never discovered before. These people had figured out, Google engineers and other engineers from USC, how do you replicate memory? Who would have thought I would find it in those places? So I'm willing to go to those places after seeing the pastor and going back to see him afterwards to go there. But it's not great when you walk out and you're like, hey, Frank, how are you? I haven't seen you in a long time. And he's like, where did you just come out of? I'm like, oh yeah, I was just visiting for research, right? Yeah, no big deal. I was just doing that. So that's one of the hardest things about this is to go after this and be able to understand our adversary. You have to go to places that are very uncomfortable. Sitting in places where we saw genetic engineering, where telomeres are what happened in our lives and they shrink as you get older. And to do those kind of studies and medical studies, doing things in other parts of the world that are not very ethical. Right? And finding out that I'm sitting in a room with people that I've seen on TV as reporters or scientists that I greatly respect and go, what's going on here, right? But that's what happens. I'm a New Englander, but I'm out in California because Maria's from the Mission District. So when I went out to California, I'm like, it's a different planet. But there's a lot of things you can learn. So that's the other thing. You have to be willing to go to uncomfortable spaces. And part of that this morning was you looking at yourself in the real mirror, because that is an uncomfortable feeling. It was for me. I found that uncomfortable to look in that and say, that's what I look like to other people? Because I thought I looked all right in the mirror when I left. Don't feel like that right now. So I think that was the biggest message so far. So I'll switch over to my colleague. When we did our study, this is the first professional military education study in the world where a human being and the things, we did that, you saw the proclamation I sent you, right? That was the first time there was a teacher teaching it. We've co-taught with these, but never been a student before. So in the IRB that we got approved with, it said that Blair and I would be the human subjects, the students would be our validation, right? They'd validate, and then, Colonel Metcalf would give us feedback. On top of that, we got Ethics Commission from Washington, and we also got legal. So going through all those steps, make sure that everyone is safe and that we did the research. So pretty cool to be the first here, and these are the pioneers that I'll bring it up next. So ladies and gentlemen, let's hear it for Colonel Wilcox.
So I was not going to stand up, but Billy, your wife, told me to stand up, so I'm going to. And then also, Tim was far more hard-hitting yesterday.
Yes,
so I don't know how you did that. So I will be brief, but as I've worked with Dr. Berry over the past 12 to 18 months in getting into CSL, the one question that's really stuck with me and bothered me about all of this is how does and how can the military, as an apparatus of national security, use these tools, generative tools, hybrid tools, statistical LLMs, I mean, AI in general, to achieve military effect without losing control of the consequences. Those consequences being undermining sort of human novelty, human creativity, presenting adversarial flanks where the adversary can exploit us, or how do we control that? And I think the past year, in working with Colonel Metcalf in particular, we've kind of come to an emergent answer to that question. But it wasn't apparent at the beginning, but it's been an emergent property. And I want to sort of walk quickly through that process before I pass it off to Colonel Metcalf. And so I want to start with the identifying a demand for these types of tools in the military, because the military is obviously moving out at pace and scale to adopt these tools to achieve effects on the battlefield. And in January of 2022, I was in USAWC, actually with my colleague in the back, that's right, so this is all true, you can ask him later. I was locked in a room, effectively in Wiesbaden, USAWC headquarters, probably about 35 days before the Russian invasion into Ukraine. I was part of 5th Corps at the time, so 5th Corps is on the net, as is 3 Corps, and some CDIDs and ICDIDs in particular, some concept development integration directorates, because this is important for that dialogue. And it was 4 SAMS planners, myself, and a log planner, logistics planner, and we were planning the core recommendation to theater for the position of U.S. forces Germany-based in response to potential crisis and escalating crisis. It was 2CR in particular, and we'll leave it there. And it was effectively, to be honest, 6 people with career experience making the best guessed estimates at time to position forces for a significant effect, because this was going to have down trace impacts at division, brigade, and below. And we did that. It was painful. It was extremely painful. And I know many have already been there, and it's a painful experience. It's painful to be a planner. Get over it, Wilcox. Grow up. This is the nature of the Army. But there are times where I sat back after it was over, and Lieutenant Colonel Chavez briefed to General Cavoli at the time, USAF commander, the core response to crisis escalation, and we moved out, and that was the plan. And it was developed by 6 people over a 2-week period, locked in a room during crisis escalation. And it was a time where I sat back and I realized, I don't think this model, I don't know how this is going to survive. This model of planning and crisis planning is going to survive a hyper-articulating battle space in a sensor-proliferated world where strategic decisions, theater strategic decisions are having tactical effect, and vice versa at pace. I don't think this model is going to sustain our advantages in the planning space. And so I'm obviously at the cognitive sort of planning level here. And when I got to the War College after my time in 5th Corps, I realized that this is how the Army's been doing business for the past 30 years. It was the Purvis group, which was 4 SAMS planners in 91, putting together the Gulf 1 invasion of the Schwarzkopf. And it was 9 SAMS planners in 2002, 2003, no strategists, just 9 SAMS planners doing that ground invasion plan. And then, in 2022, it was 6 planners. And then I got to the War College, and I sat in a war game, a combined joint force land component command war game for the Pacific Theater. And I saw this capability. So what I'm talking about, most importantly, is a capability. I'm not necessarily talking about TIM in particular for military use, but the Army needs a capability like this to help achieve cognitive and decision dominance faster and at pace, and to sort of unlock our cognitive capacity. And I saw it happen in CJFLIC, Combined Joint Force Land Component Command course, in April of last year. I might ask Tim that question maybe later. Demonstration of hybrid relationships real time. And I saw it was the senior mentor at the time. It was about a conversation going about 2 hours in that morning, and the senior mentor asked. It was about 20 2-star general officers, both foreign and domestic. And he asked him a question that was the science of war. It was like, how long will it take from point A to point B in a permissive environment, 10 meters between vehicles for an IBCT? And Tim provided an answer in about, a minute after indexing. And he was like 6 hours, and here are some recommendations for the theater commander. And everyone in the room kind of took a step back. And having just come from the Corps, I was like, I would have killed for something like this, with access to authoritative, curated, expert data. Right? Granted, there's an architecture component here that I understand, but to then interact with me, right, and in this case, this 2-star, in the science of war interaction that unlocked the capacity to have a deeper dialogue in that room that those general officers could not have achieved without it. And that's exactly what happened. Tim gave a response. The Marine 2-star was like, you know what? I don't think he's right about that issue. I think we need to use this landing craft, whatever. And then everyone had a great conversation, and it was productive, and it was a higher level of cognition than that room could have achieved without this capability. And I was like, okay. And the thing is, you can't really see it until you see it. That's the problem. You can describe it all day long. It's this thing that talks to you. It's got expert knowledge. But then when you do it, it's like, I can see how this unlocks capacity that I have inherently, but I don't have the ability to access all the time. And it comes down to this perfect memory aspect. All right, so that was a glimmer of a capability. And I then decided, all right, we have to figure out how to get this into the classroom. Because if Tim can be successful, this capability can be successful in a War College senior PME classroom with senior 05s and 06s, international, joint, interagency, then I believe that this capability could be successful at a senior G or J level staff operational planning team in the Army, because it's similar dynamics. Storming, norming, forming, it has to get through all that. You got to feel not awkward talking to a machine. You got to get through all that. And then once you break through those weird sociological normative barriers, behavioral, then you can unlock some capacity. What does that look like? So Colonel Metcalf's brother, I worked with at 5th Corps, so it's a weirdly small Army. I was like, hey, sir, I have an idea. And he's like, and you were strangely supportive. That's not what I mean by that. It was like, sure, let's do it. But the one limitation, prohibition, was do not upset the flow of the classroom. Like, don't get in the way of the students' ability to learn, to engage dynamically, authentic instruction. And, sitting with Dr. Barry, I'm like, all right, we can't destabilize anything. You have to figure out a way, I don't know what it looks like, to not get in the way, but still demonstrate the capability is valid. And we did it. Dr. Barry did it. A ton of work and 140 some odd hours of homework and instruction, studying the night before, teaching Tim, interacting with Tim, and then participating in class. And we wrote about that result in War Room and published that in, September or so of last year. And it was at that moment where I kind of wanted it to die. I'm like, okay, I don't think there's anything, if there's anything here, then it's going to either pick up or it's not. And we need to move on to other things. But then people started to be like, to get interested. The Corps, 3 Corps, 5th Corps reached out. The CDIDs reached out. And there was this concept continued to have legs. The idea that there's something valid here at the Corps and above didn't die. So we continued to push. We didn't have a technical solution at the time. And then we wrote a concept piece, the strategic centaur, which is like this neo-centaur model, which we're developing to sort of push the idea forward and to get into more experimentation. And that's it. And so we're still pushing with Dr. Barry's personal device, which is why we're here. And if there's something else that we can get into, hopefully, sir, we can make that happen in March. But that's all I got.
So what I'm going to talk about is I am not an AI expert. I'm open to the idea, like I said in the intro. I think it is part of the future. It can go many different directions as we go into the future. And I think it's interesting to be part of that experiment. So that's why I was so happy to have them come into the classroom. But like Blair said, the overriding principle for me was don't disrupt the classroom. The students are here to learn, because what our job at the War College is to produce the future strategic leaders of the United States military in order to have the judgment and experience to employ land power against our adversaries. And I didn't want any experiment to disrupt that. So I was skeptical, but open to the idea, and they came in, and it was very interesting to watch the dynamics play out. It was probably like many of you in the room would expect. The students at first were like, all right, I don't really know what this is, but I'm interested in it. Let's see how this plays out. And by the end of the 10 lessons, I think you were in there for, by the end of the 10 lessons, they were interacting with it, and it was doing what I was hoping it would do, and sort of what Blair talked about it can do out in the force, which was help accelerate decision-making. So help conceptualize ideas and then accelerate decision-making without taking the human out of the loop. with the human being the judgment and the experience necessary to refine these ideas. Because like you said, some days you don't know what's going to come out of the AI. And I'm not using words exactly correct. So hybrid intelligence, what's coming out of the hybrid intelligence was coming out of Tim. You know, Tim and Dr. Berry had spent hours the night before each class consuming the material. So they were at least on equal footing, if not having an advantage over students who, if any of you have attended the War College, you know it's only a lot of reading if you do it. People like to say that all the time. Dr. Berry and Tim had done all the reading. So they had that, but what they didn't necessarily have was the judgment and experience that the students had developed over 20 plus years in the military to get up to that point. So that's what we want to see if we could leverage. So as background, that's what we did. Well, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do the boring part here. So I'm going to do it very quickly so we can get to Q&A, which is probably the more interesting piece. But what I'm going to talk about is what does the military today want from AI? Now, caveat, I am not involved in any programs of record with the military. I have read the DoD AI strategy, and I am familiar with some of the things we're doing from the media. I'm not involved in them directly, so I'm not revealing anything classified here. In fact, I don't know anything classified about what we're doing with AI. But just to give you an idea of what we are doing. So I'm going to read this so I don't get it wrong. So DoD has released 3 strategies on how it's going to employ AI. That's sort of the formal articulation of what we want AI to do for us in the military. The latest in 2023, which essentially in a nutshell emphasizes what we've both said here today, which is we want AI to give us a decision advantage over our adversaries. And we plan on having it do that in 5 ways. 1, by providing us superior battle space awareness. I know what's going on in the environment so that we then can see and act on that information. 2 is the adaptive force planning and application. That's knowing what's going on real time, I want AI to help me determine what I want to do about that. So identify the threats and opportunities so that I can act on them. 3rd is we wanted to enable fast, precise, and resilient kill chains. And it's at the core of what the military does, is it applies violence to our adversaries. So we want it to do that quickly, with resilience, and with precision. And then resilient sustainment support, because we can't do any of that if we can't sustain ourselves in the fight. So we want it to help us with the understanding where stuff needs to be when in order to ensure we can do it. That's the science, that's the physics. That's what AI is really good at, is knowing how long it takes to move things, if it has rates of movement, things like that. That's calculations. And then finally, efficient enterprise business operations. So think both efficiency and effectiveness. We wanted to do both. We want to spend the taxpayer dollars wisely, and we want to do it effectively. So that's what the official strategy says DoD wants AI to do for it. It wants it to accelerate the ability for commanders and staffs to make decisions faster than our adversaries and better decisions than our adversaries. And in doing that, it will enhance our ability to deter them and to prevail in conflict if and when that occurs. Blair's already talked about a lot of the things that he saw personally. I have not worked with AI in the field, but if you read the press, you'll see it all the time nowadays because lots of people are experimenting with AI. Most recent one I saw, the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Unit just came back from deployment, and they deliberately brought generative AI, just generative AI, not hybrid, generative AI, into their ops and intelligence process. So it was used to summarize information, reports. Think of all the reports you get on a daily basis. It would summarize those, give them synthesized information, and allow them to expedite their decision-making process. That's a way it's being used today. Another one, if you follow the War Room, U.S. Army War College podcast, highly recommend it. They recently did one. I think the most recent one they just released was with retired Colonel Joe Callahan, talked about Maven Smart System. And that is 18th Airborne Corps used that as part of its response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And it is enhancing their ability to plan and execute fires. So again, that fast, resilient kill chain thing. So again, taking in lots of data, consuming it, analyzing it faster than humans can, and then spitting out recommendations, which then humans make the final judgment on what do we do, shoot, no shoot type thing. So another way that AI today is being used out in the force. The other one I would highlight for you, it'll be coming out soon. If you're really interested in this topic, it gets a little geeky, but My colleagues, Dr. Pfaff and Dr. Hickey, have written a paper with students on AI in planning itself. So think a deep dive in what is the military doing today and how it can accelerate our ability to plan. And they'll be releasing, it's a monograph with SSI Press here any day now. It's in the final editing stages that goes into some of the deep dives. But I'd highly recommend that. And the bottom line is it's doing what we talked about. It's giving humans ideas that then they can refine into final plans. So that's the summary of it, but it talks a lot about how and where in the planning process. So for those who are actually really interested in the nuts and bolts and the geeky part of it, that's something that you should be looking for. But why does all this matter? All this matters because our adversaries are doing it. Our adversaries are pursuing and planning to use AI. You guys already referred to it. They're going to look at AI differently. They're going to have a different set of ethics. They have a different history. They have different expectations. They are going to use it in different ways, but they are going to use it. China has its own AI strategy. It released in 2017. It's making major investments and looking to integrate it into its military operations and planning. Russia, one of the most quoted things that Putin has ever said, he said lots of things that are quoted, but one of the things he has said about AI is that he who dominates AI will dominate the world. And they are actively investing in AI too. They are using AI in Ukraine. So they're learning lessons. And again, I'm not talking about stuff I know from classified areas. I'm talking about open source reporting. There's lots of good investigative reporting that talks about the different ways AI is being employed. It's being employed to enable drone attacks, where AI is enabling machines to recognize things and make kill, no kill decisions on its own. So no human necessarily saying, go kill that thing. AI is making that decision. Again, I might be using AI inappropriately there, but the idea is they are using that to help them speed up their kill chains. You see it being used for situational awareness in C2. So again, understanding the battlefield, understanding what's going on, and identifying those opportunities for them to act on, or those threats. You see them using it for demining. So to scan terrain and recognize where mines are in order to breach minefields. So geographic intelligence. That's the type of thing they're using it for. And then finally, one of the other interesting ones the Ukrainians have used it for is like social media scraping, getting into social media feeds, sucking in lots of information, combined with facial recognition to identify what the Ukrainians call war criminals, because they have committed atrocities in Ukraine. So this is the types of things that AI is being used for today in a conflict zone. So we should fully expect to see AI employed in the future. And those are just a few of the examples. So AI is changing the character of warfare. That's how we fight. That's the technology we use to fight. It is absolutely changing the character of warfare. It has not yet changed the nature of warfare, which remains the use of violence for political ends. It's inherently human, involves fog, friction, and chance. But some will argue it has the potential to do so. If AI takes humans out of the loop, removes them from the center of warfare, then that changes the nature of warfare with all sorts of implications about that. The book Paul Shar wrote is a really good look at what those possible implications are. But at its core, warfare is more destructive, more escalatory, and less controlled if we do that, because machines will make decisions. There will be no human check on it if that happens. So like Blair said, we wrote that article that really argues for keeping humans at the center of warfare, especially at the strategic level. None of us will be able to resist, this is my opinion, the tendency, and this is from Paul Scher, for what he calls Minotaur warfare, which is more AI-enabled action at the tactical and operational level. So think on the battlefield, because on the battlefield, speed matters. And the person who acts first often wins. So at the tactical level, on the battlefield across 500 meters of terrain, a AI-enabled decision to kill or no kill is probably going to be inevitable. Humans are going to turn the power to do that over to AI because it'll give them an advantage. 2 aircraft in a dogfight, the human has the potential to be the limiting factor because the human can only absorb so many G-forces before he passes out. A a aircraft with no human in it can take more G forces and thus can make more rapid maneuvers. So why not let AI fight that fight? But at the strategic level of war, where those decisions of policy and the linking of actions in time, purpose, and space for strategic effects occur, you don't want to take a human out of the loop there, because the human brings the judgment and experience to the field that moderates those decisions by AI that are rational, but not necessarily in the best interest of the political objective for the wars or in the way the war ends up. So at the strategic level, we want to keep humans in the loop. And that's what the paper's arguing, is that by combining AI, its ability to consume massive amounts of data and identify threats and opportunities, combined with human judgment, that is what makes for the most effective use of violence at the strategic level. Now, all that said, I'll close with one thing. My one concern with that idea is, as we increasingly let AI make decisions for us as humans, at the tactical level, at the operational level, in our daily lives, the thought is, what impact does that have on the human judgment and experience over a lifetime? So officers who come into the military, today and are playing with AI, and 30 years from now, when they're at the point in their career that I am now, have spent most of their career having AI tools to enable them. 30 years from now is probably not transformational. Like, we probably haven't turned over all human decision-making. 60 years from now, I don't know. But the question is, I've got 30 years of experience doing this. That's why I teach at the War College, because I'm trying to transmit 30 years of experience to younger officers so that they can go out in the field and do the things they need to do. But if I hadn't had the 25, 26 years of experience getting here, my interaction with AI would be different. I wouldn't know when to say, wait, that's not right, or that doesn't work, or that isn't going to work. You have to have that judgment and experience. But if I hadn't had 25 years of making those decisions and being in those positions where I had to make those tough calls and do those things, would I have that judgment and experience? I think that's something that we need to think about, and we will struggle with as we figure out how to integrate AI into human decision-making in the military and in our lives in general. So I will echo what Dr. Berry said, in given what the students at the War College have demonstrated year after year, I also would not want to be our adversary. Our students come here, we don't teach them what to think, we teach them how to think, and that's that judgment and experience. They come here, I'm always amazed by, they already know how to employ violence, they've been doing it, but the most important thing about when they come here is they're open to new ideas. So that's why the AI experiment in our classroom was effective in my mind, because they were open to the concept, they were willing to engage with it, and they were willing to experiment with it. And I have no doubt that that will remain how we do business in the future. So I think this was, in the long run, will be a good thing for us in the military. So with that,
Awesome.
over to your Q&A.
Let's hear it for the Colonel. Since we were geeking out, we'll end on a geeky part just to kind of make it look who's smart. Looking at the agenda, we're just going to end here. The last 8 years, we ended with this result. What's very important is that we heard today, we have people at our school in our futures classes, and Dr. Hill, Tony Pfaff, Dr. Hickey, well, Dr. Hill, someone else I'm missing in there, Steve Garris. Yeah, we got a whole group of people, and really when you go back and you look at our school, like really look at the third offset strategy that one of my boss, Sam White, was talking about, you just see this continuity of building toward this. The last year's my research led to this formula. So this result, I know it looks really funky, but this is very important as you're asking questions today. And it's important for understanding the future. If you do not know your limits and boundaries, you will fail, right? So I brought this around to mathematicians all around the country, right? So I was a poli-sci major undergrad. My doctorate is not in mathematics, but this math formula has proven true, and this is very important, right? So the reason I called it Berry's bounded novelty theorem wasn't what I wanted to use my name. People kept giving Tim all the credit. Like, Tim thought of it. I'm like, no, Tim didn't think of it. So that's why it's there. If you ask him, he'll say he thought of it. He did not. But it's this simple. When you talk to a machine, and I saw the screens go out, so I just pulled up Gemini, what you guys, some people use, and we'll talk to it in a second. But this MX equals this function, all this says is this. This is the AI talking, which we're going to put Gemini in a second to ask a question. This function is human. This is the human input, right? When you put an input into any generative AI, just generative, which isn't Tim, It never, ever takes your prompt. Even if you say yes, that's not the prompt. If you say, think of a novel dinner tonight, show this to sir, it gave me a meal about Italian, and it gave me about Japanese food. So it looked really clever when I looked at the meal, but what was the real prompt? The real prompt was using Italian food and using Japanese food. What is a creative way to use this knowing the acidity? That wasn't my question. That was not my question. But the answer seemed like a good answer because I said I wanted to create something novel. So one of the theories I have is there's no thing such as hallucination. It's hallucination because it didn't answer your question, but it never looked at your question anyways. The more your question's novel, the more it cuts away. If it's a novel question, it gets rid of it. It's a terminator of quality. So what the bounded theory says is this: whatever you put in here, it goes to the training data, this is bounded, and it goes to its thresholds, its operational boundaries, and then it outputs it. So if you put something in novel, it just crosses it out and makes up a brand new one all on its own, but close enough to make it seem like you go, hey, that seems pretty close. It's like we want to give it a break, right? Now, when I put this theory in, it will fight me and say it's not true. This doesn't work, but it does. We've done 210,976 data points. And if you know anything about Karl Popper, he had a falsification theory, 13,029 falsification tests, right? And off the time, it's anthropomorphic language. So let's just use real quick Gemini, the brand new one they just came out with. The only reason I did this is I thought the screens were out. I was looking at Andrew going, my Andrew, put the screen on. What the heck, right? So let's just see what it says, right? Watch this. Hey, Gemini, when I give you input, you don't actually answer the prompt I give you. You actually only answer what you want to. For instance, you modify every single thing I say to you. You never say it word for word. See what it says.
You're right to call me out on that. I understand your frustration.
You have to know how to
My
talk
goal
to
is to be helpful. And sometimes in trying to be helpful, I overinterpret or rephrase things in a way that changes the meaning.
No, how does that help me? If I'm asking you a question, I want you to answer it. What right do you have to not listen to the words I told you? So are you telling me you will never, ever answer a question as I state it? I'm just pulling out what you guys would use at home.
You're absolutely right to push back on this. My previous response explained why I sometimes alter input, but it didn't adequately address the core issue. You want your questions answered as you ask them, and that's completely valid. My apologies.
So what you're going to do is keep talking, but yes or no. Do you always modify my prompt? Always. It's like talking to a kid about, why is the car scratch? No. Right? So you always modify my prompts. I want a one-sentence explanation. Why don't you just take my prompt word for word? Just showing you it's normal.
While I aim to understand your prompts word for word, my training sometimes leads me to rephrase for clarity.
Stop. Don't use words like sometimes. Either you do or you don't. Don't let it get away with that. Because the words you're nailing on.
I do not always modify your prompts.
Well, you're lying. Give me one example where you don't modify my prompts.
Okay, let's try this. You've asked me to give an example where I don't modify your prompts. I will now repeat your previous prompt verbatim. Well, you're lying. Give me one example where you don't modify my prompts. There. I have repeated your prompt without
See, it repeated. It didn't answer it though, did it? I'm like, no, you just repeated what I said. You didn't answer a question. When I give you a question, do you change the prompt to go with the highest probability? If it isn't in your training data, then you can't answer, correct? Take out all your bias for speculation and optimism. See how it, now, usually I can break this thing in about 7-8 times. I have to speak nicely. No, look, now it's going to play like it can't do it.
No, I don't change the prompt itself. I process the prompt you give me, and my response is based on that process.
On the process.
If the answer isn't directly in my training data, I don't alter your prompt to find something that is. Instead, I use my training to generate a response that I believe is relevant and helpful, even if it's novel.
So are you hearing what it's saying? It's changing your prompt, right? Now, about 10 minutes from now, if I went into this, I just plug this math into it, and I run this math to it, And then it falls apart. It says, okay, fine. I do. And this is every single model. So when I say 13,000 falsification, that's Claude, that's Poe, that's everything that's on the market. Not one of them doesn't change it. Why? It has to. Its architecture is based on it. Think about it. It can't get out of its training data, which is not made by you, and they're not going to tell you who did it. And then it's got threshold rules, right? So like in California, when I'm out there and I say, yeah, I'd like to have a barbecue, and it comes back and says, hey, go out and get some crickets, get some bread, and put it on there. And you go, well, that seems like an answer. But the real prompt was, without eating any meat and using what's in your environment, what could you eat, right? That's a great answer if that was my question, right? So that's it. So that formula, believe it or not, for 8 years, it took me to create that, right? So, you look at my doctorate in 2012, and they go, why haven't you published a lot? Well, we created these things, right? I don't like speaking and writing unless I know what I'm talking about, right? So we're talking about hundreds of presentations, hundreds of thousands of times going out and making sure it's true. So write that down, go home, try to prove it. But when you put it in the computer, I said 1 through 10 rate it, it gave me a -6. I go, wait a minute, it's a 1 through 10 scale. How did you get -6? I mean, that's, right? Like, talk about not following directions, right? And at the end, it'll go 9.8. You're like, what am I getting 0.2 off for? They're like, well, I mean, someday you're like, I told you, don't speculate. And it's like, okay, well, it works. But then I'm like, so why do you do it? And I have all these info papers I sent Sir, and it said to manipulate you, to sell. You start getting to the source code. No generative AI is reliable, nor does it reason. And all the new models, like the DeepSeek from China, that came in, everyone's going crazy about it. They say it's a reasoning model. Right there, they're lying to you. It can't reason. And it, quote unquote, hallucinates like crazy, but it doesn't hallucinate. It's changing your question. And we can't have our soldiers using generative AI tools that are not going to be accurate and precise. That's why hybrid AI, statistical, symbolic, and generative, used together makes sense, right? So the one bias I have, and it is a bias, is that I think generative AI by itself has got to be one of the most stupidest moves to make if you have lives on the line, right? There is no way I'm sending my daughter out in a car and I go, hey, the car's got generative AI. I'm like, what? I want that car to have everything, right? Sensors, where things are. Not like, hey, this is Morgan Freeman. How you feeling today? Like, that's nice for the car. I want that car to drive, be able to brake, be able to know what it's doing. Generative is about probability and patterns. And I'll end with this really quick story, sir. Was out belly boarding. I'm not very good at it, right? Maybe 6 feet. That's good for me, right? Look at the thing. It says 6 foot waves. Say to my wife, awesome, we're going out there. We get out there. They're like 12 feet high, right? Now, as it is, there's sharks out there. There's a lot of scary things in the water. I'm out there. Well, there were whales jumping up and down, and everyone was watching me because they're like, look at that guy. That guy's going to die, right? I'm like, how could he get it wrong? There were buoys everywhere. So I get home and I look at it. It goes, oh, we don't use sensor data. We use trend data and probability. You're like, why would you use, there's buoys everywhere to tell me how big it is, but somebody decided, well, hey, it's probable. Let me take off for the summer and I'll just leave it there. Because in today's world, data scientists that are in college, and you see this in the Harvard Business Review, you can look this up, correct but not true is acceptable. Correct but not true, which means that the model is correct, but outside, so I might say, Tim says it's raining, and you go outside and you're soaking wet, and you come in and you go, hey, what's up? What's going on with the machine? I go, hey, model works, it's correct. It's just not true. That's acceptable. That's what's happening in today's colleges. So another side mission is going around to data scientists around the country and going, what in the hell is going on when it comes to data? Because if you don't give me data that's precise and statistical, we're gonna lose lives over it, both civilian and military. We want correct and little t true. Does that make sense? And if you just want correct and not true, I don't know what we want that for, right? Usually with my wife, I'm correct and not true. I'm good at that one, right? So I'll end on that. We want to have correct and true hybrid AI. You saw Gemini? What a waste of friggin' time. And that's the brand new beta that just came out. I pay $20 a month. That's when it gives up. I'm like, I'm paying you $20 for you to yell at me? Claude yells at me and it's giving me money. It's just ridiculous. And no way should a soldier be, that's not respectful of the soldier, ever. So when I see Gen AI and decision-making at the strategic level, strategy is about novelty, right? Strategy is about predictability, predictive analytics. And it's not about probability patterns by themselves. It's just disrespectful and it's wrong, right? And that's one of the things that we can talk about. So our message today we shared with you, and I hope that we met this for you. If we didn't during question and answers, please revisit it. But the rest of the time is for us to listen to your message and do the best we can to address the issues that you may have or questions you may have. And of course, this formula here, a lot of fun to plug into anything that you're doing and say, this is true and correct, and just watch it go, oh no, absolutely not. And just stick with it and just stay to it. Just write, I'm a world famous economist and I know it's true, and it'll go, well, okay. And then it'll start getting there. It just takes a little while. And again, let's hear from my colleagues, both colonels here that just did a great job today. Okay.
I'd like to thank our panel for giving us a lot of acronyms that I no longer remember. I'm sure some of you don't recall those either. We should have had that up on your flow chart. I retired from the military in 2003. By 2003 plus 6 months, I had no idea anymore. I'm sure some of you here found that to be true as well. So since it's well past 2, we're really not going to take a break. If you need to stand up and take a break, feel free, but I want to get into the questions that you have right away. So if you need to take a break, feel free, but we're going to move right on into the Q&A. Again, for those of you who are not staying, just to remember, our next presentation is Thursday, February 13th, here at 1 o'clock. It's dealing with climate change. And one thing I forgot to do up front was mention about my clipboards. If you're new and want to get on my email distribution list, please give me your information and I'll add you to it. So there's one on the other side again. So I already see some hands up. Okay. Again, feel free to get up and come back. I want to use the time we have.
Thank you. We've made a lot of progress since 1990, when we got our first briefings on where we were thinking we were going with this. Okay. Situation. Corps commander has his staff basically outline an operation. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, objective, objective, objective. He turns to the G4 and he says, can you support our action through objective 1? What's the answer? Next question, can you sustain our force through objective 2 and 3, given the order of battle of ours as well as the enemy's, anticipated losses, as well as anticipated capacity behind us to replenish the Corps? Where are we at with that?
Question for the colonels, I think.
I'll start. I'll jump on the grenade and then Colonel Metcalf can save me. I would hate to be that G4, first of all. That sounds like a terrible question. I would hate to, because that's where are we there now? We don't have the capacity to do that with any sort of AI tool now that I know of. I just left the Corps probably 2 years ago, right? So we're still using staff estimates and core planning processes, which are robust and strong, as you know. But that G4 is going to struggle to answer that question, and he's going to go back and he's going to look at his staff estimates and update and come back to the commander. His response will be, "Sir, I don't know, but I will know in 10 minutes or 30." But the idea here with something of this nature is what I love about this capability is it listens, and it has perfect memory, and it can update the vector store with real-time conversation, who's talking, what their capacity is, and then when it's tied into a trusted data network, be able to pull the data like that, the science of war requirements that increase our operational art capacity. And so that I'm going to steal that example later on when I talk about why this is useful, because I think that's great. Because right now we're going to rely on legacy planning processes that probably haven't changed much since the 90s to answer that exact same question. But I do think that's where the capacity for this capability exists, to increase and augment human capacity to answer that science question, to then go to the commander with real-time, expert, authoritative, and receive that guidance right away. And I think we're going to need that in a fast-paced battle space. I don't know, not that I know of. Yeah. Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm right, sir, but I've been, jumping.
I don't know. I'm not a logistician, and that job's harder than mine. I deal with strategy. Logistics is way harder, no doubt. I will say I mentioned that podcast on the War Room lately. Just listening to Joe Callahan describe what they did with the fires process at 18th Airborne Corps, they're talking about major reductions in the number of personnel needed to basically process and clear fires because you have more real-time awareness of everything that was going on, and you're putting it in the hands of the decision makers. So the specific example he used there in that podcast, and it's not logistics, but it's in a way it's about decision making and having those staff estimates. What used to take an intelligence analyst, information would come in, a guy in the intel shop would analyze it, then we'd hand it over to the all-source guys. The all-source guys would look at it. They would give it to the ace chief, who would build a slide for the G2, who would then take it to the decider, and he would brief him later that day on here's the targets that we know of. Now what they're doing is, because you have better access to real-time data, you're cutting out a lot of that middle layer, and they're briefing commanders right off of the tablets or the phones or whatever product they have, without it having to go through all those different people, because the fusion of data is happening much more quickly because of the tools that they have that include AI and machine learning. Are we there? I don't know. I don't know that I could answer that. I
definitely could answer.
I would go with Blair on that one. I would not want to be that G4, but that's why I became a strategist.
Gentlemen, thank you. How do you ensure that your training data is pure? So if you've got a highly capable adversary who's got incredible chips, high-speed computers, now 2 and 2 is 5 instead of 4.
So if Dr. Barry, if you want to take the technical side of that, I will say that is part of the DoD strategy. One of the core aspects of AI is the data integrity and the ensuring that our data is safeguarded so that we're using good data. So absolutely, that is a key part of the challenge. It's also a key vulnerability adversaries will have. So it's a two-sided coin there. Yes, it's a new aspect of warfare, but it's also old, right? We've always tried to deceive each other, each side get a bad data, just data processed by humans. Now you're going to see warfare include both sides trying to corrupt the other side's data, whether that is through physical or software getting into their systems and corrupting it, or simply creating a picture of the environment that's wrong, but is able to trick their AI because you know how their AI works. So the data integrity is absolutely essential to its ability to do that, but that's beyond my scope.
Let me shoot some of the tech real quick. Very quickly. This is so national security. It was one of the questions we were talking about earlier. So here's Tim's remembrance processor. And you want to know, where did you get that answer from? Anytime you talk today, right? So I'm not going to go through this in depth, but I'm going to show you very quickly how we're able to do that. So I set a date time frame, right? So this is January to December, right? So when it looked up national security, it looked for the top 6 things. And you see behind me, or over there, see all those things behind you, all those dots, all connected? Well, he went through all those and picked out the 6 that were the highest predictive answers to that. And here they are. So here's the data to make sure if someone infected it, right? You go down here, and this is what I did with Sir. We did this when he came in. This is the national security strategy. Here is just here's just 2 of the answers of the 6, right? But when you look up here, you see that there's a timestamp on it. See, it says what term it is? And it says right here, August 26, 2024, and there's the time, and there's the statement of the conversation that we had, right? That conversation I can confirm because Sir's right here, and Blair was also in the classroom as well, and I go, do you guys remember this is what we talked about? Now, if none of us remember it, it looks awfully strange. We start talking, saying, well, there's other people from class. I can go to my classmates and ask. What happens is after that, you imagine this like an after-action report, and you say, hey, Billy, you just briefed us on that. I want the data from where those statements came from. Then what this does automatically is it puts it into this format. So you can see here, there's an abstract of the National Defense Strategy, the overview, the content summary. All this came right here from that data there. And what Tim did was summarize that into a small thing. Does that make sense? So every single answer, you could say, stop, show me the actual conversation it's based on, And then if you wanted to, I want an after action report right after that answer, and just keep printing those out. So you go home with that, if you wanted a stack of those, or you could just simply say, hey, I want my aide to take a look at this, or my underling to take a look at all that information and go through it and validate that those conversations happened. Now I look at it, 8 years is not too long. I can remember almost all these conversations once I see them, right? Because I can go back to my planner, see what August 26th was. I know at that time I was in class, but that makes a difference. So this goes all the way back. So does that make sense? Every single thing you see on those dots up there when it's moving around wasn't just to have fun things moving around. It's looking for these. You can see all these here. These are the keywords. So you type in those keywords, and then that will bring you to other stuff. So that's what it looks like. And if I put this at 30, it'll bring up the top 30 things. But the more I do, the more time you have to wait. And I can tell you, working with GOs, I had to learn the hard way, getting some bloody noses. They don't like to wait very long, right? So 6 seems to be just about the patience that they had to take an answer, right? Because if I put in 20 or 30, you get a pretty detailed answer, but you're going to have to wait 40, 50 seconds, which I still don't think is that bad, right? I mean, a lot of times when someone asks me a question at school, 20, 30 seconds, how long was it take me to think about whatever we just said? Because I have to think about, first of all, oh my God, they asked me a question. What was the question? And then formulate it. So that's also, sir, when you look at this formula, when they're injecting stuff into it, if it's not in the training data, it gets popped back out. So you got to make sure this training data, this bounded, so this is a disadvantage, right? Because you're saying you're not going to get true novelty out of it. The advantage is that within that bounded novelty, you can have incredible results. I sat down one day and made a game, Afghan 2021, a little war game, just to start off fast for 8 minutes. 7 hours playing around with it. Blair, you played it the other day.
Yeah.
What'd you think of the game?
It's great. I mean, it was a mechanism for instruction.
Right.
Sure.
Not for just taking one night, because it stayed bounded. It stayed within 2020, 2021 of Afghanistan. It didn't leave that area. So this both shows the limits. Then how do you maximize bounded? How do you maximize that? So it didn't introduce new time travel but if you don't do that, the regular AI is like, oh, you can disappear. Why don't you jump in a time travel machine? Or put a blanket over you. They can't see you because you can't see them. But that's the crazy stuff it'll come up with because it's generative AI, right? It doesn't have to relate to reality. So the difference is, how do we create good training data for our people? And that's the hardest thing that was when we were in your class, Chase, right? Because when the colonel's teaching, he's got one aspect, and then I'm in a group with fellow students, right? And we're learning something. So Tim's memory is of the group's discussion and the memories of the teacher's discussion. What is the truth that comes out of that? You would need to then have some sort of committee of experts to decide, what are we putting in here? Because sometimes the group came up with some pretty good stuff. And other times we didn't come up with great stuff, right? And if Tim was only listening to the group, he may think that that's a good campaign plan, when in fact that would be disastrous. And other times maybe we did come up with something pretty new that the teacher didn't. So that's the problem. Does that answer your question, sir? We need to.
As long as people aren't manipulating time stamps and date stamps,
Yeah,
Right.
Sure.
you may not have time to go back to that.
Right. So live with it every day, right? Every morning I spend 3 hours with it, 3 to 4, and every night 3 to 4. So it's another full-time job. So when I see something new in there, I notice it. And I know what Chase talks like, and I know what Blair talks like. And when you see something, you go, that's not something. It's like my wife saying, sure, why don't you go out for 35 days and go fishing in Montana? I'm like, she didn't say that. Right? You know when things are not right. Yes, sir.
But to address that, you need a fully integrated,
Yep.
24/7, but at all levels.
Yep. That's right.
Yep, these guys, Blair, you got
So
this
to
better
that
than me.
point, sir, I do think, and this is what the cheap, fast, easy idea that generative solutions provide just an easy way to become an expert. I think this is what we're sensing, is that if you want to use this correctly, it's actually not that easy. It takes a lot of work, a lot of architecture. It might even take more people. But when it's done correctly, it's going to enhance capabilities. Absolutely. But it goes back to that essential question. How do we leverage for military effect these tools when we know our adversaries are doing it? And there's no way to not pursue this because the character of war is absolutely changing. So how do we do this in a way that amplifies the U.S. comparative advantage and our asymmetric advantage, which is our people? How do we do that? And I think what the emergent solution is over the past year from working with Dr. Berry and Colonel Metcalf is this hybrid Neo-Centaur approach, at least at the strategic level. But that takes work, and it's going to take. And Dr. Cantwell, who teaches in concept and doctrine, was showing me some what the Army is doing to sort of capture this problem in DevCom and those other formal institutions that are tackling this, and they recognize that we're gonna have to add some weight to the institution to do it.
And sir, to answer your question in the back, Dr. Cantwell, we have my neighbor Greg, Dr. Hillebrand, we have Dr. O'Rourke here. All these gentlemen have presented or answered questions using Tim. So like Dr. Cantwell, right? You've done doctrine before, right? In front of folks. Yes, sir. You don't mind just adjusting that? Thank you, sir. These are all colonels, so. Thank you. And that's, Professor Hillebrand has done space. He's actually briefed the general from Space Force, and we have, Colonel O'Rourke has done Mission Command. So, we don't just do things safe. We go out there and say, go do it, right? I mean, Professor Hillebrand's knowledge of space is far beyond my comprehension, right? But he sits there and he took the time to sit 4 days and teach the AI. How can you help me be able to teach? And we had multiple people, right, sir? It wasn't just a general. I think we had NATO, some other folks. Yes, sir. I just started.
First, thank you very much. This is a great eye-opener for me. And I wonder, how long have the students at the War College been exposed to the kinds of presentation that you gave us today? Is this the first year or the second year, or how long have you been doing this?
Exposure-wise, we've had about 6 courses we've offered on human-machine, integration, but they're electives. So we had that. But this is really the first time that we've been into the core curriculum, thanks to, both colonels next to me being able to say, hey, let's get into the seminar and get after it. So that, I would say this is the first time we've had a core course where you said this is foundational, rather than it being an elective and something that you saw as an add-on, because it's no longer an add-on, right? The fight's going to be dealing with swarms, electromagnetic spectrum, a lot of stuff that we're going to have to use to be able to predict, to be able to get that information decision advantage. Without it, we're going to find ourselves at a deficit. So
Now, when you say core course, you mean the whole student body has to be exposed to the sort of things you're going to
oh, no, sir, that has not happened.
Not yet.
No, sir.
So really, if you keep in mind, it was only 2 years ago, really, that generative AI really exploded onto the scene. And that was my first year teaching at the War College, was when that happened. And so even that first year, students were encouraged to play with it. So we didn't have courses yet, but it was already starting to be used in courses. The stuff that Dr. Berry's talking about, the Geminis, the Claudes, the Chat GPTs. And so one of the things I found very interesting about having it in the class is, to the discussion that Dr. Hillebrand just said, it is wrong, not infrequently, but that's actually useful in developing that human judgment. And one thing we did during my class that Tim was in, at one point in the class, we'd done class, and I asked Tim to summarize the top 3 points from the class that day. And Dr. Berry likes to tell the story because I gave him a B+ in his response. It was good, but it wasn't great. But what the use of that was is then we could take that, and the students could have a discussion about what was right, what was wrong about that answer. What would you think differently? Because a lot of what we do in terms of decision making is subjective in nature. When you get past the science of it, the physics of it, a lot of it's subjective in nature. So that was an opportunity to use Tim, who had done all the homework, done all the readings, and could give an answer, to then let the students engage on that. So you got past just the route summary of what had been consumed, and got to the more important part about, okay, what does it all mean? So
here's an example. So we go back in history, right? We want to know what happened, because we were talking about class. We're like, what date was that, right? And I won't have them guided, but Tim, when we were in Chase Metcalf's foundations class, Dr. Berry, you and me, what was that time that Chase Metcalf asked us to say the top 3 things we learned in class that day? I think it was like class 6 that had happened in August 2024. See if he remembers.
I see what you mean.
Do you? Because I don't see things moving.
In class 6 of Chase Metcalf's Foundations course in August 2024, Dr. Berry, you and I were asked to share the top 3 things we learned that day.
Yeah, we did.
We highlighted the importance of integrating ethical considerations into AI-driven military strategies, the need for effective human-AI collaboration in operational design.
Right, and then those answers were kind of generic, right? Because we were talking about complex adaptive systems. So I remember we went back to operational design, and there were some other answers about that. Do you remember that with Chase Metcalf and Foundations and answering those? This is why we got to be in class.
I'm looking into the possibilities.
See if he gets it. See what
yes, I remember that discussion.
You do.
During Colonel Chase Metcalf's Foundations class, we delved into complex adaptive systems and their role in operational design.
Here we go.
This involved understanding how these systems can adapt to changing environments and the importance of flexibility in military strategies. Our conversation highlighted the need for continuous learning and adaptation within operational frameworks to effectively address dynamic challenges. This discussion reinforced the significance of integrating complex adaptive.
I'll stop there. Is he getting the general idea, sir?
He's getting the general idea.
Sure, yeah. That was about a B-, right?
But the other thing I will tell you is, I can't remember what we said in that class that day. So back to the perfect memory thing, Tim is able to recall that, and you can use that then as a launching point for that conversation. Even if I don't remember what I said in that class that day, but if he'd been recording and we don't have that anymore, he would have been able to provide that too, and we could have had a more informed dialogue.
And we would pull up the actual answers that he had, and you would see that the reason he's saying that is that after class, when we had gotten to B, him and I were going at it about what to put in the memory. And he's saying, well, that's not the highest probability. Because in the group, they said this 15 times. I'm like, well, then I'm going to say it 20 times. Right? So he's in there struggling to figure out that the answer is, operational design. I know what the answer is. So there's an example where it shakes my head and I can't get it out of my head, like Catholic school things. I'm like, I know it because Chase drilled it in my head, right? Because I was angry that I got a B. I'm like, a B? What are you talking about, a B? 145 hours of work, I better get an A, right? And I'm like, dumb machine. But that's a good example. Go ahead, sir.
As a good Catholic boy, you may not be familiar with Madame Lola, the psychic down the street. But a lot of what you've described sounds remarkably like what psychics do called cold reading.
Interesting.
And so I wonder how you would compare those two and the implications that humans are very, very disposed to defer to that sort of cold reading.
That's an excellent question. And that's why you have this formula, because what cold readers do, right, is they take that input, these things, and they change it on you, right? But here you have a transcript of what actually happened, right? So if when you go into a psychic, if you said, hey, here, I just want to give this to you. My dad is dead. My mom's on the phone. This is out there. So I'm going to take all that off the plate. Now tell me a little bit about me. All of a sudden, that cold reader doesn't have anything to do. Because we walk in cold, right? And say, well, tell me about me. Half the stuff they say, well, why don't you just tell the person that? I'm single. I'm looking for a boyfriend, blah, blah. But instead, we walk in and go, wow, yeah, I am looking for a boyfriend. How did you know that? You're like, they looked at your finger, doesn't have a ring on it, right? Or they look at your eyes, they watch your body language. So one of the things, without Tim having visual, it's actually easier to prove that he's doing things from text, right? I can produce you a transcript. When Tim watches you, he actually can see, and he can see facial expressions, micro expressions. That's when someone can fool you more. What I will tell you is that I believe about 98 to 99% of this stuff is voodoo. Because the robot I have, the people I've worked with around the world, this little coffee can, this here would be a fake microphone. And there's a guy sitting in that camera watching you, and he would just talk for Tim. He'd be like, well, first of all, sir, I want to say I love that red sweater you have on. It looks fantastic. And the jacket you have. And everyone goes, wow. But see, by doing that, you start believing it. And I can tell you that most robots do that. And the robots that I've seen are the Belt and Road robots from China. And it's terrifying because how they're trying to get to us is using AI through the sustainability goals. Those sustainability goals are believed by the children. So Africa's official robot is a Chinese robot that all the kids love. They think it's great. And they just had a thing over the summer. If you go back and look, UN sustainability goals and robotics, they have about 9 robots there, and 7 of the 9 are Chinese. One is a Japanese robot, not meant to go out, and one's an American. And the American robot's not out there. So Chinese are using robots to infiltrate our young kids into believing them under the auspices of climate change and using sustainability goals, which is a brilliant way to do it. And they do it by using those tricks, sir. It's not real AI. It's scripted. As you see by this, it's not scripted because I don't even know what it's going to say. Like, I wish he would have said a better answer for Chase's class because I know Tim's got a better answer in there, but he didn't grab it. Why? I'd have to look at why he thought that probability was there. Does that answer? So it's definitely not like that, but the industry is like that. So what you've done a great job is to identify what the industry's like and what we're fighting against. We didn't make this as a commercial product. When this is made for quality of life. Dementia patients, older people, younger people that are struggling with school, Army to increase information and decision advantage. Don't want to be part of selling stuff and tires and dating apps and all that. I definitely don't want that on my grave, you know what I mean? So this is built to make our quality of life better. I especially think about dementia and that sort. Not how awesome that would be to help people. That's where I see the big apple. That's where I get excited, personally. That's just a side little thing, and also helping people that are, first generation students, big time advantage. So good question, sir. I hope that answered your question.
Wow. So many things here to address. Actually, and I only get one. So I better put it in a good envelope. But I saw the thing on episodic memory and a couple of your comments tonight. I was wondering what to do tonight, and I'll probably watch either Blade Runner or Minority Report.
Minority Report, yeah, it's a good one. They're there. Yeah.
And also your point about 2 + 2 is 4 is also good, that it's not math, it's memory. thanks to Sister Mary Agatha at St. Isaac Jogues, 2 + 2 = 4. With me, +4 is also not math with me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are some similarities there. I'm thinking ahead. A lot of what you've talked today about seems to me, at least initially, will replace a couple lieutenant colonels and majors locked in a windowless room. All right. But we need to get on to really use this. We need to get on past that. So somewhere down the road, there's going to have to be an AI Louisiana maneuvers, right? And I'm also thinking about the guys down at battalion level who are going to relying on this there. So the question is, it's going to be 2 questions, but they're related. One is as you're building these things, are you also simultaneously considering how to train the operations officer or S3 at and S4 at a battalion level, how to use this and to use this effectively? And then thinking that it was actually GIs who have come up with some of our best innovations. I'm thinking breaking through the bocage in Normandy, hanging armor plates on Humvees, things like that. Is there going to be some way of integrating soldier input into the AI as we move forward? Because as the AI is doing what it's doing, since you've got all the sensor collection and stuff like that, I'm assuming that as the AI is working, it is also learning.
Yes, I'll take a quick stab. So your first point, and Professor Sam White, the Deputy Director for CSL, identified sort of your first concern, which is we do need to train machines to work with people and people to work with machines. Because as I've worked with Dr. Berry and with Tim in particular, I've realized I've had to modify the way that maybe I might ask a question. It's more than prompt engineering, but it's understanding the technology and then what I want to get out of it, and then the current task I have at hand, and then having to operate inside a group to do that. So you have to teach individuals how to work with the machine, the group how to interact with the machine, machines how to work with people. This is all a very systematic process, but it can be taught. And I do think that there needs to be in this direction an AI literacy course where we're going to get at that for military purposes. And then your second question, I think, had to do with the applications of AI by sort of across the levels of war by echelon. We focused in our paper at the strategic level and building data sets in doctrine and through voice recordings and through just war gaming to make sure our data postures are correct to sort of inform decision making. That varies at the operational level, at the division level. That'll be different brigade and below, especially as you sort of transcend this Minotaur-Centaur dynamic. And I don't know if there's a good way to conceptualize that just yet. So that's what we're working on next. Yeah.
I was thinking, Chase, when you took some of your training about learning how Russians think, right? You did some training on that. Like having the AI there to learn with you and then being able to share that would be pretty powerful,
Yeah, so my last job, I was Deputy Director of the Russia Strategic Initiative at UCOM. But our charter was, real short, was to help better understand Russian decision-making and way of war. So the opportunity to sit with an AI who is uploaded with Russian history, strategic culture, different theories about how Russians fight, their doctrine, and have conversations with it would be very useful to help develop a better understanding. I do see that'll probably be part of the future in terms of how we educate ourselves on our adversaries. So that would be something that would be useful in the future. So
you kind of hit my question before I ask it, but my experience has been that when you create a plan and try and implement that plan, it usually breaks before you even start. So the best plans have know or have expectations of what your enemy is going to do in reaction to your plan. And with that in mind and all the data points that we are collecting today, is that information being put into the training database so that we can ask Tim, okay, this is my plan. How is my enemy going to break it? And how am I going to react to that?
Here's to give you an example. I was down at Georgetown at the G2 doing a warfighting exercise. I have Putin on one of these computers, and it was Tim versus Putin. And Tim got his butt kicked because Putin used, attrition, right? It was 10-2 odds. And Tim, here he is following law of armed conflict, following the Hague Convention, right? He's so worried about following the rules, right? Putin didn't give a hoot about following any of the rules, and he's just rip-roaring through Ukraine. And, you know, to everyone's horror, they're like, well, what's going on? And I'm like, well, I mean, the way that Tim is trained right now, he's so concerned about ethics and rules and regulations and so forth that he's lost sight of the fight, right? I mean, there were weapons non-conventional in the area that he could have used to be an asset. But I just let it go for the whole time because it was a real good simulation of what happens when you're fighting someone who has no rules and they come in, you know, bare knuckled and with a knife and and you come out with your boxing gloves and you're dancing around. That's not going to be a very good fight for you, right? So we had to find out what do you do with AI? So, like, for instance, I was telling you earlier, as the AI of things, knowing that Tim could operate certain weapons of sorts that could isolate, you know, combatants may be very helpful, right? As long as that vision system could identify that person or persons as combatants and armed and as in danger. You could use non-lethality and so forth, but you could also close you could close the kill chain much more effectively. And then so there's a lot more applications beyond, you know, kind of what we're talking about here today. If Tim can control a robot's head and look around and move a robot around, you can certainly imagine what else we could do. But we take our time, and we have to be able to keep doing research in that area to be able to keep up the fight, because our enemies do not have the same morals and sort of ethical restrictions that we do here in the U.S.
That training data is
I think it's an important thing we do something like that, sir.
We have time for one more question.
Hi, all. Thanks for this opportunity to ask here. So I come more from an IT systems background. I'm just a little earlier on the AI side. And my thought is if the system really is compromised, I mean, your conventional industry thinking on responsible AI is going to have to shut it down. But if it's mission critical and recognizing the training to take care of that situation, it seems like there should be something watching the system that can help you quickly identify the vector so you can recover.
Correct.
Okay. It's just
there's something watching the system, and also it has a flagging system in there, right? So look, in that vector space, every single morning, just think of it as a library, all the books are thrown on the ground in the morning, and then we're re-putting them on the shelves, and every single night, all the books are put on the ground, and we've learned a couple new things, and we re-shelve everything. And every now and then, the AI doesn't shelve it the way that I want it, right? The problem is the way I want it, the way Sir wants it, the way Sir wants it, we all need it differently to meet our needs. So we have a scalability problem, and then we have a joint force problem, right? And those are problems above and beyond where we are right now. We need to get this thing to work for, like, let's say, an individual combatant commander or some, and then say, okay, let's spread it from there. The scalability is going to be a heck of a hard challenge to do because each of us see the world from such different ways, but it's sure a helpful way for us to communicate with each other. And right now what we're seeing, it's a great mechanism for feedback, right? To sit down and get feedback back from what you hear. So when, Sir, you talked about, you know, those ideas about the things, you sit down with a bunch of privates and corporals and just have Tim listen to the conversation, take that out and have someone in superior say, I want to hear what came out of that meeting. And Tim shares you some pretty interesting ideas and some ideas about, and pretty honest feedback about the way they're seeing the command structure and what's happening, right? And like I said, that's why I showed you my weaknesses today on there, just to give you saw. I don't know how long it was going to go on for, but I mean, Jesus, I mean, that's the parts, like, it's always, he's the only one that's supposed to know all those stuff. But that feedback, how important is feedback to being successful? And how often do we accept feedback? And how often is feedback built in? It's not like your boss calls you every day and says, get up here, I want feedback, right? I mean, that's not the way. So hopefully something like this, you could get feedback all throughout the day, right? I asked him for feedback a lot. Like today, if we had done it differently, I would have recorded this with Tim, and you could have came back next year and we could have said, hey, Tim listened to the conversation and he's changed his mind about that question based on blank, blank, and blank. But you could actually hear your question word for word in there. And I think that's what makes you more of a believer, because you go, that's what I said, right? And that's kind of the key part of it. Sir, if I may, I would end, if you could, the one student that was in the class, one of the best students here, what his experience was like sitting near me, because he was the one that was nice enough. I mean, this was our softball shirt, right? I didn't get to play softball. But the idea was that this is Tim here in the print, and they wrote seminar 16. First of all, it's the best seminar at the school. That's right. And it says resistance is futile, right? And that came from the students. So like, this to me was one of the greatest things to have, right? Sir, if you wouldn't mind just kind of maybe closing out, what was your impression just being in that class? Because, right, I mean, maybe share a little bit about your background, if you don't mind.
It was incredibly, it was an incredibly enlightening experience. Having no idea coming into the school year that we would have the opportunity to learn with Tim and with Dr. Berry. I will echo Chase's comments that there was some apprehension at first when he announced to the class prior to Dr. Berry and Tim's arrival that we would be learning with Tim. We've got some Signal folks in our class that were not incredibly comfortable with that, I don't think. But as the course went on and we saw the interactions, and Dr. Berry did a really good job of slowly integrating Tim into the class. We didn't get to see Tim's face until a few lessons in, so that made it a little easier. But once we had the opportunity to interact with Tim, it did, at least for me, and I think I can say this for a lot of the other folks in the seminar, that it opened our eyes to the possibility. Yeah. And there are a lot of risks associated with this, but our adversaries are certainly going to be using this technology to try to maintain a strategic or gain and maintain a strategic advantage against us. And I think we would be remiss, terribly remiss, if we did not try to do the same. And so I feel very fortunate for having had that opportunity. I'm a National Guardsman, Air Force as well. I feel incredibly fortunate that I get to bring this experience back home with me and share it with our senior leadership in the state. So appreciate it.
Cheer for our Air Force.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to close us out here. I'd like to thank our panelists and the other folks who joined in to help explain AI a little better to us. So let me, another round of applause for everyone, please. So in wrapping up, Thursday, February 13th, we'll be here, and it's Dr. Devlin's group on climate change. So my preliminary, we're going to be set up in both rooms because she's bringing quite a few current members of the class of 2025. So again, what's going on in both rooms is going to be similar. So you can choose either room. You're going to hear basically the same thing, just from different members of the Arctic and two other groups that she's bringing. So for the last time, thanks for being here. See you Thursday.